I think I began really working with the figure because it was such a great challenge. So when I was an undergraduate and then in grad school, I really wanted to develop my drawing skills. And I was at that point looking at artists like George Tucker in particular, was someone who I was looking at again and again for the use of the figure and developing a psychological space. And I was also at that age, maybe something a lot of young artists do, creating work that had a lot of affect. It's just, like almost like a diary of the things that was going on in my life. So working with the figure, doing self-portraits, things like that, it all kind of tied together to create the work that I was doing. I was working in drawing, mixed media drawing, as well as a lot of lithography. And then etchings in the Manet Noir method or in the black method, where I would etch the plate really dark and then scrape back into it, like almost like a reductive charcoal drawing. So it was really after graduate school that I really started to reevaluate my practice, because I had been working a lot in printmaking, working a lot in large drawings. And I ultimately, within a few years, ended up living in Los Angeles, in a place where I had my studio was in the second bedroom with white carpet on the floor. So not a place for large scale charcoal drawings. I could get time at a local press, but I would do that in exchange for working as a master printer. And that really didn't leave me much energy to create new etchings of my own. But I had some great projects. I printed in several editions for Raymond Pettibone and people like that. So it was a great experience. And I loved, in some regards, working at a master printer. But it didn't leave me the time or space to want to create and print my own works. So I started getting creative and thinking about my practice a little differently. And so the little Epson color printer that I had been using just for like printing out resumes and things to ship out for opportunities, I started looking at that as a vehicle for more of my practice. And that really started to change things. And one of the first pieces that I did in Los Angeles was this piece, it's called Inside of Me. And so I took images, the sizing chart models that you see from like Gap stores and others, where like measure here to find your size. And I printed on Mylar with that figure with all these different views of the inside of the body. From x-rays to microscopic views of cancer cells and things of that nature, and then cut the Mylar back into the silhouette and hung those off the wall, and light and shadow became a big part of the piece. There were 100 figures in total. Light would hit it and they would expand and contract. And that really opened up my practice to think a little differently about things. And then I started layering a lot. I got to a point, I bought my own press, and I started embracing that technology and putting the analog, the hand back into it. And that's really been a key component of my practice ever since. And in fact, as I'm talking, the pieces behind me are just that. This is a dry point print that has a digital component behind it that's been printed on very thin Japanese paper. So that kind of hybridization of my movements, working analog with the digital, is something I continue to do. But then kind of experiences has led me to kind of think in terms of the figure, to think more deeply about the universe. And so I was creating a large scale mural in Roanoke, Virginia, where I lived before here. And I was planning to go abroad for a month for an artist residency in Malta. And I was trying to think, what am I going to do? And I was outside, maybe too many spray paint fumes. I don't know, but I started questioning. I was looking up and being like, well, what holds the clouds in the sky? And when I made the move from Los Angeles to Virginia, I just started intuitively photographing the sky, because there was such a huge difference in the sky quality in Los Angeles with smog, and the differences of living on the coast versus living where I was at in Virginia, actually in this kind of bowl right next to the Blue Ridge Mountains, where we had more clouds, more like here in South Florida. So that question kind of set me up to start to investigate physics and to think really deeply about sciences as well as contemporary practices and things that kind of make us see the interconnections. If it wasn't for, that back to that, it's a childlike question, which I think is part of its power too. It's very innocent. What holds the clouds in the sky? Well, if it wasn't for that molten core at the center of the earth and the effects of gravity, we wouldn't have the clouds in the sky, right? And without that 10-mile swath of the atmosphere above our head, we wouldn't have life on this planet. So that is kind of my trajectory and where things have changed.